When in the field, trying to survive, one has to consider the essential four: water, fire, shelter, and food. Today, we want to consider food as one of these essential four, and how one will try to procure that food. There's hunting and there's gathering. With hunting, you're going to have to expend an awful lot of time stalking your prey, trying to remain silent, and ending up scaring them away. With trapping, you have a more passive effort, where you set the traps during the day while the animals are hiding anyway, and allowing the traps to work while you're away. Traps, of course, are a regulated activity, requiring a license, and in some localities even being illegal. So while practicing trapping, make sure that you've checked into your local laws. In survival situations, of course, you have to meet other requirements, that of staying alive. There are many kinds of traps, some involving mechanical, some involving triggers, and some very passive, and that's what we're going to focus on today: the very passive trap of the snare. First, we're going to look at string as a material for snares. String is very easy to store, very lightweight. Any snare, what you need is a loop to form a noose. Any knot will do for that. You pass the running end, working end through the loop, and that gives you the noose, or the basic snare. Problem with string, of course, is it's very flexible and will collapse unless you have it propped up in some fashion for the animal to get into it. String comes in a lot of different strengths. This is 50-pound braided Dacron leader line, and that's going to be pretty good for just about anything. Like I said, it has that tendency to flop, so you have to prop it up with something. Next material I'm going to look at here is floral wire. This is available in hardware stores and flower shops, I presume. I know you can get it at hobby stores too. Floral wire, in this case, this floral wire is 24 gauge. Don't know what the actual wire is, but it is enameled. It has a green enameling on it. When making wire snares, you want to form your loop so that it is a 90-degree bent, or at 90 degrees to each part of the wire, and then twist it so that each part of the wire is wrapping around the other, rather than one wrapping around the other one. Make a loop in both ends. The reason for making a loop in both ends is so that you can attach string or cordage to the running end. Wire is very nice because when you put it in place, it stays where you want it to be. Don't need much in the way of holding it up. The floral wire in this case has a working load limit of 10 pounds. The safe workload for wires and cords and ropes is usually 1/2 of its actual failure strength. This one was rated at 10 pounds. My failure testing on this actually showed it to be less than 20 pounds. So have to be a little bit careful. I suppose this wire, being very nice and flexible, will be adequate for squirrels and rabbits. Nothing much larger than that though. The next product I'm going to look at here is copper wire. Copper wire is nice and flexible. This copper is 18 gauges. It has a safe load limit of 14 pounds. Testing revealed this to have a failure strength of 34 pounds, so a little bit more than what the manufacturer says it was good for. Holds its shape nicely, pretty flexible, nice and restrictive. Going to do that job pretty well. Now we want to look at galvanized steel wire. Galvanized steel wire is probably overkill for snares. At 18 gauge, this wire has a safe work limit of 25 pounds. My testing rig is only good up to 50 pounds, so I can't say that it say what my tested failure rate is. One thing about galvanized steel wire is it's much stiffer than the floral wire or the copper wire. Even so, it's flexible enough to choke down on the intended victim, our animals that are going to provide us food, of course. When you have some springiness like that, you can crimp and have it hold a little bit better. Remember 2 loops, remember 90 degrees when you twist the wire. What do we do though for larger game? Larger game is going to require something much stronger even than the galvanized wire. We go from basic to overkill. This is 3/32 1x7 braided steel rope. This happens to be stainless steel. You would have to fabricate one of these ahead of time. It requires a special tool and some special hardware. The hardware is a ferrule which then gets crimped onto the cable using that special tool there, which is a crimper. The crimping tool has a variety of dies that it will squeeze down on, from a very coarse one which I used on the silver commercial ferrules, and a more narrow die that I used on the copper ferrules that I made myself. Whether using the copper crimp or using the commercial ferrule, you get a nice sturdy snare here. The strength rating on 3/32 1x7 steel cable is 1,200 pounds. One could get a black bear with this, I suppose, if one were lucky enough. It would all depend on what kind of cordage you had on your running end. This tends to be a little unwieldy and might need to have propping as well. So there we go. We have several snares with various materials: copper, galvanized steel, braided steel rope, and floral wire. This should give us a nice array of things to have, from a coil of wire which we can quickly make snares with and store away with little space, to a pre-manufactured snare that can go into a bag and be ready for use should you need it. Thank you, and remember that the knowledge you carry into the field weighs nothing and takes up no space in your bag.